Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning. Morning.
You good, sir?
We can always come back.
Oh, absolutely. So, are you doing okay this time?
No, thank you. I've been just you know, not been fun. Said a couple of people went to the head.
Did you find it?
If you go in, come in on.
Yeah, right by the printer. Okay, there's a plastic sheet. Okay. There's a GM behind that. Teleconference service. Please enter your access. Can you call a little back on my desktop? Okay. Okay, thank you.
You need to do it.
Join the conference as host. Press star. Otherwise, press pound. Please enter your so behind that, there is board member dial.
What else going to do Thanksgiving?
Do not know. As a matter of fact, I'll call them. I'll try and.
For a menu of available commands, press star pound.
anybody on the phone?
Joy.
Let's check.
We've got 6, and who do we have on the line?
And Mark is coming. Good morning. Is anyone on the line?
Hey, this is Trip. I'm on,
Hey, Chip, good morning.
and this is Glenn Jones.
Hey, Glenn, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
We're ready to start.
Okay, I'll go with that one. Might be still in the meeting.
I'd like to ask everyone to come in.
Johnny?
Michelle, I want to do a roll call, please.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. We're doing roll call.
Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson Jr.,
Here.
Mr. Bob Kruger,
Here.
Mr. Bill Gross,
Here.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
He's on the way, as I understand.
I believe so. Miss Joy Birch Meeks.
Here.
Mr. Trip Tollison.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Buster Evans.
Here.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Here.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum for today's meeting.
Great, thank you. Then we'll begin. I'll call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020, and it is 9:38, according to my watch. So we will begin. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being far away at the same time. We have a forum, as we said. Glenn Willard, Trip Tollison are on the phone, and let's begin. And then I'll make sure you all know too, we are streaming on the JIA YouTube channel. Any others we need to mention? Okay. We're going to go to the Historic Preservation and Conservation Committee. Bob Kruger is the chair. Mr. Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to call on Ben Carswell, our Director of Conservation, and Dr. Rob Brown from Goodwin Mills and Kegwood to present the Glen Shoreline Protection Act or plan.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you, Mr. Kruger. Introducing this morning, Dr. Rob Brown. Rob is is an engineer with the firm Goodwin Mills Kegwood. Rob's group operates out of Savannah and has a deep portfolio in environmental and coastal work. Has done a lot of work for Chatham County, Tybee Island, McIntosh County, and the project he'll be presenting on is a project that's a collaborative effort led by Glenn County, also involving Jekyll Island Authority and the City of Brunswick. This project is funded through a coastal incentive grant, which you all know is a grant program, federal funding that comes from NOAA, passed through DNR, and we have benefited from that grant for some projects on Jekyll Island as well. So in this case, we're a collaborative partner, and when Catherine Downs with the county reached out to us and asked if we'd like to be involved in a shoreline assessment and resiliency plan proposal to be followed by a sea level rise response and implementation plan in cooperation with the county and the city and DNR, that was a no-brainer to sign on board and contribute in-kind match in terms of staff time towards that. Our 2014 master plan calls for a shoreline management plan for Jekyll, and we feel this meets that call and is even better than going it alone. Just like the economic vitality of Jekyll Island is tied both ways to the economic vitality of the county. The resiliency and coastal resiliency and resiliency to coastal hazards and sea level rise. In that sense, we're all connected as well. So I'm delighted for Rob to tell you more this morning, and this is the first installment, and there will be more later, but this is the culmination of the shoreline assessment and resiliency plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Ben. Okay. Okay. Let me know if you have any issues or trouble hearing me, but thank you for that introduction.
Since you are at a long distance, if you're comfortable with it, you could move your mask.
And if I may, Commissioner Williams is now present.
Great. Well, thank you for the introduction for this project and presentation today. It's my pleasure to be here this morning to present the culmination of the first phase of the Shoreline Protection Plan grant that Ben had mentioned. And as part of this project and grant, as he mentioned, it's a joint effort with the City of Brunswick and Glynn County. And the purpose of creating the Shoreline Assessment Implementation Resiliency Plan is primarily that it serves two major functions. One, it achieves that objective from tying back to the Jekyll Island Master Plan, and two, by creating a plan that outlines potential projects and prioritizes those projects. It serves as a resource that can then be used for future grant applications. So this project created a plan that will provide an assessment phase of all these projects with shoreline assessment. And then from that grant and that future grant potential opportunities, there's lots of opportunities for resiliency in the future with grant applications. So it basically, by completing an assessment phase, it enables larger pots of money to be available for design as well as for future implementation of projects. And it carries more weight to have a plan supporting potential projects and these prioritization of projects as well. Just another little brief background about myself personally and my firm. So I live here in Glynn County, and I serve as the local Brunswick office manager for GMC. And we do a lot of work with Glynn County, the City of Brunswick, and the Joint Water Sewer Commission. Locally, we completed a comprehensive plan for Glynn County, and then have conducted a number of other coastal resiliency work along the Georgia coast, including a sea level rise study for the city of Savannah and Chatham County, and then a carrying capacity study for Tybee Island, and provide technical assistance for National Floodplain Insurance Programs, community rating system for McIntosh County, Tybee Island, and City of Brunswick. And then me personally, a little bit more about my background. My background and PhD is in the area of green infrastructure, stormwater management. Let's get into the plan itself. This grant is funded by a coastal incentive grant from NOAA and Georgia's DNR Coastal Resources Division. Glynn County is the grantee, while City of Brunswick and Jekyll Island Authority are project partners on the grant application. All three serve on the Shoreline Task Force, and that task force was set up so that they could share information jointly and formulate cohesive and linked efforts between all members to create a more comprehensive approach countywide for resiliency. Joint Water Sewer and CRD also participate on the task force at our regular meetings, and GMC was selected through an RFP process to be the consultant on the grant planning process. Just a brief timeline of events and how we got to this grant process. So you all remember the history of events in fall of 2016 and 2017 with Hurricane Irma and Matthew impacting Glynn County. Here are just a few photo examples of those impacts to our shoreline. So following the fall 2017 Hurricane Irma, the coastal incentive grant application period opened, and the county pursued this grant application with the city and Jekyll Island Authority to develop a shoreline protection plan that would address those problem areas prior to the next major storm. Fortunately, the last few years we've been not had those impacts as we had in those previous two storms, but it's important to plan long range for future impacts. So that shoreline protection plan aligned with the 2014 Jekyll Island Master Plan. Specifically, it called out for developing an assessment of the beachfront and marshfront shorelines, as well as linking together with sea level rise response and those anticipated effects. So the grant was set up with 2 phases, and they really lined up with that approach and that objective from the master plan, where the first phase is focused on a shoreline assessment and the second phase on a sea level rise response plan. This identifies just those key objectives. But really the first step was to gather shoreline related data. And when I say shorelines, it pertains to both beaches, marshes, and riverfronts. And then the project and plan was set up so that we would look for areas where there's vulnerability and then explore potential preventative measures and remediation solutions. And the focus of this presentation is at the completion of this first phase, the shoreline assessment and implementation resiliency plan. So the grant was awarded in fall 2018, and then there was a series of 5 task force meetings held over the last year and a half. And we're supposed to get together for a presentation back in March with all the commissions, with you all, the city and county commission, but then that was canceled due to COVID. So we had extended our grant period and are presenting that now to you all. But this provides a summary of the task force meetings, those 5 task force meetings we held for this project. I'm going to zoom in and focus in on a few of those specific meetings, highlighting first, the first meeting after GMC was selected in the summer of 2019. We focused in on project goals and community engagement and GMC coordination on the project. And then during the fall 2019, we focused on data gathering and field assessments, as well as community engagement. So the first thing we did was we acquired all the local GIS data sets and data sources. This included NOAA sea level rise data, flood zones, historical shoreline change data sets, SLAM, which is sea level affecting marsh model, which is essentially looking at marsh migration, critical facilities, beach profile surveys, and used all this data for our preliminary desktop analysis. We also participated in a booth. Glenn County had an educational booth at Coast Fest last fall. And at that event, we had a mapping exercise where we engaged the public to identify areas where there was coastal erosion and king tide flooding. And during that event, we identified 27 locations across Glenn County. Following this engagement and identification of projects, we later confirmed these and discussed them with local staff to include them in on our project lists. So during the fall of 2019, we focused in on having field visits with local staff from JIA, the city and the county. Specifically, we were looking to identify places and potential projects that had issues with coastal erosion, king tide flooding, and other flood-prone areas, and other vulnerable areas to coastal storms and erosion. This map shows the collection of data points that were identified through our field inspections. With each data point, we included in our GIS database and identified what the specific issues were, the various threats, notes, and then a series of photos tied back to each of those data points. These are just a few photo examples from those shoreline erosion field visits. On the top left, this is a parking lot at the wharf around the edge of the seawall. The bottom left is the North Loop Trail up by Driftwood Beach. The top middle is some historical tabby ruins at the historic brewery site near the Horton House. The bottom middle is the channel along the edge of the cemetery near the Horton House. The top right is a photo along Ocean Boulevard on St. Simon's Island, and then T Street on the bottom right in the city of Brunswick near the Academy Creek wastewater plant. Another activity from the fall 2019 was we gave a presentation to the House and Senate Natural Resources and Environmental Committees. Catherine Downs, Assistant County Manager, and myself were invited to give this presentation to their Environmental Academy, which was facilitated by UGA's Carl Vinson Institute of Government. And we had gotten a lot of positive response from the participants in that meeting about them being excited about our planning and process for creating a matrix that would help us identify where the most vulnerable shoreline segments were. And they responded back with a letter of acknowledgement and saying that this made them better informed for their 2020 legislative session. So our third meeting was held in January 2020. And at this meeting, we had a workshop set up with the task force in which we had 4 stations and rotated the task force through each of them to get feedback for the plan development. So our first station on the left is we reviewed all those potential projects and vulnerable areas with the task force to make sure we had successfully identified them all appropriately and if there were any that might have been missing. Picture on the right, we also had a second station with reviewing GIS data sets and making sure we had all the appropriate data and information. And to help gauge the task force's feedback on which data set should be prioritized as we developed our matrix for ranking areas and threats. The light blue shading just shows the 1 foot of sea level rise across St. Simons Island, and then the outlines around the channels are the historical shoreline change data set and GIS. And then our third station was set up to review and discuss management practice preference survey. So from this station, we discussed a total of 14 practices and received inputs on issues and opportunities of each. A few examples will be presented in the coming slides, but overall the task force was specifically interested in more the natural processes and in living shorelines. So the picture on the top left is an example on Jekyll Island. The top right is an Ashantilly site on Sapelo Island. The photos on the bottom are constructed dunes on Tybee Island. We also discuss other management practices, including sand dune fencing on the top left is an example on Jekyll Island. Green infrastructure stormwater management, an example on the bottom left from St. Mary's. And then a number of other just conventional and typical shoreline protection measures with bulkheads and seawalls and with tide control for stormwater systems. So the picture on the right shows tide gates, but there's also tide flaps as another measure. And we also discussed riprap as well. And this is just that full comprehensive list of those 14 practices that we reviewed and discussed and identified issues and opportunities for. And they are all detailed in the plan itself. Our fourth task force meeting focused in on reviewing the matrix and ranking and prioritizing the projects and problem areas. So just a brief introduction to the matrix. So this was set up with, we identified 10 factors, and each of the factors and the weighting were based off of responses we got from the task force from the previous meetings. And then once we scored all the projects, those rankings were then used for prioritizing the projects. Additional input included on the project list was that we identified relative costs for the projects. Because this was a very high level assessment, we didn't assign specific monetary values, but looked more at relative costs, and then identified proposed solutions and alternatives. And then the goal and objective is that through this assessment phase, that we would then be pursuing future grants for design and implementation where they would refine the specific designs and come up with more specific costs for these projects. This was more to identify those projects overall and rank them in level of importance. We also identified potential partners and project leads, and these were tied back to funding opportunities as well as ownership. Just a quick review of the various factors we included. So the top tier highest factors were type of infrastructure, proximity of infrastructure to the shoreline, and sea level rise impact affecting that infrastructure. These all receiving 10 points. Just as an example of those factors receiving 10 points, the type of infrastructure would be critical facilities, historical structures, and major roadways. With proximity infrastructure, 10 points was awarded if they were within 50 feet of a shoreline. And then points were scaled down based off of 50 and 100-foot intervals. Sea level rise was awarded 10 points if it was impacted from the 1-foot sea level rise scenario. And then moving in 1-foot increments of sea level rise scenarios, we assigned fewer points. Another set of factors that were the lower tier, but still very important, were tied back to vulnerable populations, and the metric used there was tied to grant funding eligibility. Ownership of parcels was selected as a factor due to ease of construction and coordination. Special habitat was tied with habitat for wildlife, as well as presence of freshwater wetlands and other vegetative communities. We also included flood zones and previous flooding areas, where if they receive more points if they're inundated from king tides and on a more regular basis, and a lower level if they were just impacted from the recent hurricanes. And finally, the final factor was mid-tier with a maximum number of 7 points was if they also had erosion present. And this allowed us to give more points if we had more weight that they had subject to both erosion and flooding purposes. For this, we used the Georgia Southern data set for historical shoreline change over the last century, or we used a visual assessment if the site was not adjacent to one of those shorelines that had the data set available. In summary and in total, there were a total of 15 projects identified on Jekyll Island. And based off the rankings and scorings, they were split up actually just exactly into thirds in terms of prioritization. Those with the highest priority near term in blue are all more concentrated on the northern end of the island. And this is because this is where the larger shoreline change rates have been observed and documented over the past several years, as well as having lower elevations and then some of the historical structures being up in that area. Our intermediate priority projects were then focused more in the wharf and the historic district area, and these also had some higher rankings due to type of infrastructure, proximity to the shoreline, and some of the elevations being impacted with various sea level rise scenarios. So our final meeting with the task force was held this past August, in which we reviewed the draft plan and received feedback and comments. And then in the last month, we've updated those plan and comments and incorporated them into the draft shoreline protection implementation resiliency plan. So that has now been completed, and the first phase of the project wraps up at the end of this month with the presentation to you all and the city and county commissions. And then we've already started to do some background work for data gathering for the second phase for our sea level rise and response and implementation plan. And our plan is for having a task force meeting in October to kick that off with the task force to review the data sets we've compiled already with resiliency and sea level rise, and look forward to being back and presenting the highlights of that study and our recommendations this spring in March or April as we finish up the 2-year grant itself. So I'd like to thank you all for your time and ability to present this information and plan to you all today. And if there's opportunity for any questions, feel free to, I would be happy to answer those for you.
Questions or comments from the board members? Hearing none. Rob, Ben, thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you very much. You have a nice morning.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you, Mr. Kruger. We'll now open the floor for any public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes each person. Anyone wish to speak? Okay. I will next go to the Finance Committee. Bill Gross. Mr. Gross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, we'll discuss a few things. First is the August financial statements. Revenues for August were $2,279,912, which is $411,000 better than the budgeted for the month. Year-to-date revenues reflect a favorable $770,000 variance from the budget and an unfavorable $1.3 million variance from the prior year to date. We're very cautious when preparing the budget for the first quarter of the new fiscal year. We're proud to say that in most cases, we have surpassed the budgeted revenues in both July and August. In addition, we have exceeded revenues from prior year to date in several locations such as parking, campground, Life is Good, and the Guest Information Center. Schools start back later this year and had a positive impact on revenues for the month. The locations with the largest variances from budget in August were the Convention Center had a budget shortfall of $117,000. The center remained closed all month due to the cancellations. Parking revenues were $141,000 better than anticipated. Summer Waves had a good month with revenues coming in at $155,000 better than the budget. Expenses for August were $1,683,883, which is $379,000 or 18% less than the budget for the month. Year-to-date expenses were $638,000 less than budget and were $820,000 less than prior year-to-date expenses. It's early in the year and Jones and Marjorie are continuing to keep tight rein on the expenses. However, many of these budgeted expenses are for items that will need to be done at some point during the fiscal year. So most of the variances in the expense categories are assumed to be timing variances and will likely be spent by the end of the fiscal year. The largest expense variances for the month were human resource expense, down $88,000 due to the vacant positions being held open for as long as possible, saving on labor and benefit costs. This category should be a permanent variance and not a timing variance. Advertising expense, $73,000 less than budget. Repairs, facilities and grounds, $90,000. Net operating cash income for August is $796,029, which is $789,000 better than the budgeted net operating income of $6,554. Year-to-date net operating cash income of $1.4 million better than budget and $504,000 worse than prior year-to-date income. August traffic statistics are impressive. Total traffic count for August was 112,681 vehicles, which was 12,493 more vehicles than August of 2019. This is the first month since the COVID-19 pandemic started that our traffic counts have exceeded the prior year-to-date traffic counts.
I think for us to be aware of, and that is the past 5 months, our traffic counts have been down every month. So as you just said, it's very significant that that in August, our numbers were up.
I think people associate Jekyll with clean, fresh air. So year-to-date traffic count is 739,481 vehicles, which is 169,493 less vehicles than calendar year 2019. The hotel reports, August revenues reported by the hotels were $3.6 million, which is $482,000 less than August of 2019. Occupancy rate was 58.2%, which is down from 67%. Revenue per available room was $108.11, which is down from $120.18 in August of 2019. ADR, average daily rate, was $185.73, which is up from $179.25. Calendar year 2020. Revenues reported by the hotels are $25.9 million, which is $8.9 million less than the year-to-date in 2019. The occupancy rate was 58.2, which is down from 70.8 for year-to-date 2019. Revenue per available room was $100.86, which is down from $133.22 from year-to-date 2019. ADR, average daily rate, $173.38, which is down from $188.16 year-to-date in 2019. Mr. Chairman, that is the August financial highlights. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I could comment, I think it's very important that net operating cash slide that was up a few minutes ago, maybe Michelle can put that back up. Of course, that is taking in consideration the revenues and the expenses. And even though our actual revenues are up over budget, and our expenses are less than budget, I think it's really important for us to realize that you have to compare this with the previous year, that the comparison with the prior year in this case becomes extremely important because everything we're dealing with now, whether it be revenues or expenses, we're talking about a level that is much less than the previous year. And obviously, we very conservatively budgeted as we entered this COVID budget year because we didn't know what to expect. But I think it's just imperative for board members to realize that even though the numbers may sound good, there's still a concern because of the fact that we're not near at an operating level where we usually would be.
Well, and the fact that we had good weather and August is a strong month financially anyway, so.
Exactly. So now we enter that time of year whenever we're usually really dependent on convention business. And of course, we basically have no convention business. So.
Right.
We're going to now open the floor for any public comments. And Michelle reminded me, I failed to mention after the Historic Preservation and Conservation Committee, you can make public comments online as well. But the floor is now open for any public comments.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We need Marjorie to tell us about the golf course maintenance equipment lease.
Maybe a little taller than I am, so. Okay, the staff would like to request approval of 2 leases for the golf course maintenance equipment. We originally entered into a lease for golf course equipment 4 years ago, and that lease is coming to an end. We found out that because this machinery gets used so much with the number of courses we have, and that leasing is the best option for golf course maintenance equipment. So we're requesting to enter into 2 separate leases this time. One, there were 2 pieces of equipment that came off the last lease that were still in really good shape. And so they're going to lease those to us for a reduced amount. So those 2 pieces of used equipment would be on a separate lease. And that would be at a rate of $510.29 per month for a 48-month lease. And the other lease is for 15 pieces of new equipment at a monthly rate of $6,627.56 per month. And that would also be for a 48-month lease. If approved by the board, the first payments for both leases would begin October 1st, 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on that.
Any
That's going to
questions?
require a committee action.
So did you want to vote on it now, Mr. Chairman? Yes.
Where's
Okay.
my lawyer? Where's my counselor?
So yes, we want to have a vote. So
Well, it's a committee vote.
do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor, signify by.
Need discussion.
Sir,
Required to have discussion.
any discussion?
Thank you.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you. Motion passes. And then last, Marjorie's going to give us the update on the audit findings.
Yes, sir. In your blue folders, you'll find 2 reports from the state auditor. One of those reports is for the annual business lease review that we have done, and the other is for the JIA engagement that they performed. And I'd like to say this year was a little different with all the COVID restrictions. The auditors are all working from home. And so instead of them coming to Jekyll and working from here, they all worked remotely. And so we handled all of the business through either scanning documents and sending them to them, handling meetings, using Teams meetings or conference calls. So it was a little different than we've had in the past. So that's a little bit of an adjustment we had to deal with there. But we didn't want to not have one. So it all worked out well for that. On the business lease audit, they go through and they confirm, based on the businesses that we provide them, they're on a rotating basis. So they get an audit every 2 years. And this audit was for 2018 and 2019. They went through and confirmed all the mathematical accuracies of the business, the base rent and the percentage rent payments. They compared the business actual accounting records that were sent directly to them to the reports that they send us to make sure that all of the revenues that should have been included were included. And then they go through and they check the reserve requirements for anybody that had a capital reserve requirement. They looked at the proof of insurance and the security deposit for those that had requirements for those in their lease. And the findings are in the report, but basically they came up with about $11,000 that's due to the JIA from those either late fees or calculation errors or things that may not have been picked up in that audit on their reports sent to us that should have been. So, Jones, did you want to say anything about that one?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment on both of these letters. First of all, the one of the authority itself, I think it's important for board members to realize what a great job Marjorie and her team do in that you'll see time and time again for each of the items that are areas that were audited, that the state auditors come back with statements like everything was properly reconciled, all documentation was appropriate. And they're looking at usually a 5-year period. And so I just think that's very important. I've been in situations before where things weren't nearly that impressive and clean. And I just think that they do a great job and they're very conscientious and dedicated to making certain that everything is done appropriately. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I also think that when you look at the other letter, and I was involved with the audit debrief, I should have said that, with the auditors. And I think when you look at the other letter where they are actually talking about the individual business accounts that they were randomly reviewing, that there are a couple of issues. And frankly, we'll be talking to Melissa about this from a legal standpoint, because we have some leases where there are some provisions that are frankly being ignored. And I think that is a serious situation. And it may not amount to a lot of money, like Marjorie just indicated that the overall findings were like $11,000. But to me, it's a matter of principle. And I think that we need to make sure that if something's called for in a lease, that it's being adhered to, or either the lease becomes in jeopardy. So you can expect to hear more on this. We had a discussion just about a week ago with one of our lessees, and it was over a very little a bit of money as far as some late fees and setting up a proper reserve account. And they indicated that would be handled, the corporate person that met with us. And so those are the kind of meetings that I anticipate us having more of, because we don't want to have a situation where we get back to the way some things were several years ago. And I think if you begin to have minor issues, sometimes then they over time become major issues.
Thank you. I agree with that 100%. And we have a responsibility as board members, as you all know, to make sure that these issues are addressed. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to point out that each of you will be receiving an email from the state auditor's office with these reports in them. That's part of their requirements. So if you haven't gotten them yet, you will be receiving those shortly.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions from Marjorie? Good job, Marjorie.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our report.
Great, thank you, Mr. Gross. We will now open the floor for any public comments. Again, 3 minutes. And if you wish, you can make a public comment online. All right, Human Resources Committee, no report, Dr. Evans? Okay. And then the Marketing Committee, Joy Birch Meeks is the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, Kate is going to bring our marketing report and talk with us about how the marketing department continues to look for new business in our challenging times and opportunities. Kate?
All right, thank you. So I know that everyone got tired of seeing bar charts that were sad about our convention center business. So I've changed it a little bit for this time. As Joan's already told you, it could be described as bleak in some ways for 2020. And I bring this one up because this is from Kevin Udell, who, like me, grew up in a place far away where there is winter, and also fruit trees that in a certain time are pruned back. And they certainly don't look good at the moment, but they are done that way to ensure something better for the future. And that is kind of what we are looking at now in terms of our groups. 2021 looks very good. Most of the groups that have postponed moved into there. We did have a small event just last week here at the convention center. That was the first, and it went very well. We were followed by 2 site tours that day. We're getting leads, we're getting, business, and we're looking out to what can we do now to cultivate for the future. And I'd like to show you a couple highlights of that. The first one is Motor Coach, our tour buses. Now, we've seen them around, and some people say, well, what's going to happen with that? Well, it's a very highly capitalized industry, a lot of buses, a lot of tours. It's not disappearing, but it is changing radically. So you can see on there this Southern Coast Vacation. This is from a company that used to do a lot more international tours, city tours. This is their most recent offering that's bringing in Jekyll Island along with other southern destinations. Now, previously, we were very much a spoke that people might stay in Savannah and come out to Jekyll. Well, now with less interest in staying in a city and wanting to stay somewhere smaller, quieter, as Mr. Gross said, with nice fresh air, we are seeing opportunity for that model to shift. So we are pursuing a pretty aggressive approach that includes membership in some of the key associations, which gives us access to their database, market intelligence, connection. We are working with marketing to really get great sales pieces from landing pages, content, to go out proactively and go to these tour groups and say, yes, we have a great offering for you. We have places to stay. You might know us for our history. We have even more than that to bring that up. And I'm happy to report that in the last, I believe it was a week and a half, we have received 300 bookings for tours for 2021 to 2022. So those companies have reserved them. Now they got to sell them, but that certainly gives us some optimism that this is a market that we can go after. So another way we're going after and staying in the market is by staying active with our associations and in the world of the people who plan and book meetings. And you can see there we have our own Kevin and Maria doing a little version of what I'm sharing with you now, a powerful and uplifting message. And we also have a great advantage that we have these two who have such a wonderful reputation in the meeting industry. And at this meeting in Savannah, it was attended by representatives in person from all over Georgia. And the message was definitely not retreat, but reimagine. And I know that reimagination is familiar to all of you sitting here. I don't have to tell you anything about where you as a board and an organization have been before, but it's kind of interesting to think about it now. So back over there on the left, there's the Morgan Center when Kevin was selling a convention campus to people. It was a very different environment, but we persevered and we stayed on. And then to the right, we see not too long ago, there's Governor Kemp in the Morgan Center now, which you recently referenced in the Georgia Tourism Conference as I was just at Jekyll Island. They're doing meetings. They did them really well. So there is a possibility with leadership and with the team that we have to persevere and to keep the business going. Now, here's a little something different. And for those of you listening at home, I have the names of some companies up there: Venmo, Instagram, Uber, Airbnb, Square. What do they have in common? Well, you might say millennials love them or they're doing pretty well, which would be true, but they were all founded in 2008, which at that time was the worst economic climate since the Depression. People might say that is a terrible time to begin something and start a business, but we saw that seemed to be a pretty good time to think like an entrepreneur and invent something that meets the needs of people now. So I am hopeful that in the future, when I do have a bar chart for you again, it will have some more fruit on it. You can be assured that we are working in different fronts with your support and leadership to make that happen. We do see some good signs of improvement. And if you doubt me, if you came on the island today, what did you see? 2 construction signs pointing in opposite directions for the Residence Inn courtyard and also for the work being done on the villas. So that's a sizable investment in the future. And I think with the product that we have and the team that we have to offer it, we can say we can look ahead of the future and hope it'll look a bit more like this. That concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board? Taking Kate's analogy a little further from the ag perspective, I think our team continues to do a great job to water and fertilize the soils so that we are not forgotten when business begins to pick up. Thank you, Kate.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, that concludes our report.
Thank you. We will now open the floor for any public comments. And again, you do them online. Okay, we'll move to the Legislative Committee. Tripp, you ready to report?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I just wanted to highlight 2 projects that we have submitted on behalf of the Legislative Committee and the board to the state, to the governor's office and the legislature for consideration, the Jekyll Island campground expansion, which is truly shovel ready. All the design work has been done. Just need some money from the state, and then of course the public safety complex. The Jekyll Island campground is about the projected cost, including the JIA funding, which is $3.37 million, and the public safety complex, which is with including the JIA funding, which is $2.2 million. Again, both of these have been submitted to the higher ups at the state for consideration. And of course, Jones and I, and certainly the rest of the board, will be talking about how we can advance the ball and hopefully get these projects considered for the governor's budget. Thank you all for this opportunity. I'll turn it over to Jones for more explanation and comments.
Thank you, Tripp. Not much more to say. I think it's important to remind board members that these are the same projects that we submitted last year. And last year, the campground expansion project did make it through the House Appropriations Committee and into the House budget. But then as it was turning the corner and ready to be considered in the Senate, we had it teed up with then Senator Hill. And of course, unfortunately, he passed away and COVID hit. And so everything that we were working for there kind of evaporated. It is important to note, Tripp and I have been talking, we have already heard from Appropriations Chair England. He is supportive of these projects again. And obviously it would make it much easier if in fact these projects were included in the governor's budget. So I think that's the mission for today, is to bring that forward to board members. And then Tripp, I think we need to figure out the strategy from there. But if you'll remember last year, one of the issues that was important was to get the necessary land reclassified in accordance with the master plan for these projects, even though the 12 acres needed for the campground expansion were already included in the acreage in the master plan. We still had to go through the legislative process. And so if you recall, last December, both of these were reclassified. So as Tripp said, the campground is ready to roll. All the design work is done, the engineering work on that. And we will be coming to you, presenting to you, if in fact the budget can hold, we will be presenting to achieve the design work for the public safety complex right after the first of the year, so that it would also be ready for construction if in fact the state were to approve that project.
Tripp, any other information?
That's all I have for now. Joan summed it up even better than me, which is usually the case. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now open the floor for any public comments. Hear none. Again, public comments can be submitted online. Next is the Golf Master Plan final presentation. Troy Vincent from Vincent Designs. Troy.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody again. I think we tried to do this last time, or we kind of did in April. So it's good to see everybody face to face. My name is Troy Vincent. I'm president of Vincent Design, a golf course architecture firm in Augusta, Georgia. We've been working on this project for 10 months. Our team consists of Bill Boswell, who's also a golf course architect, working with us on this project. We've also had JLA, who Alex Reynolds and Rhett Harbidson, who are land planners and landscape architects. Pond, Stephen Bailey, Michael Savage, Peacock Lewis, Mr. Ken Hart. That was the team that we had submitted when we first were awarded the RFP. So I'm not going to go through every single bullet point. This is a long presentation, so we'll try and get the key points. Bunch of key points are the Jekyll Island facts. I mean, number of rounds that Jekyll Island currently is doing per year from the years 2014 to 2019. And then at the top, you'll see the average number of an 18-hole golf course does 31,527 rounds a year. So if you are averaging with 63 holes, you should be doing about 110,000 plus rounds a year. The bottom line, you'll see where you're falling short of that, which is kind of where, how we were brought into the picture. Good news, membership rounds have increased. One of the key parts of this was in 2016, National Golf Foundation, or we refer to them as the NGF, was retained to in the keyword, there's two key words. They were retained to evaluate the operations and the economic performance. That's what they were hired to do, okay? Very good report, a lot of good information in that report. We agree with them in regards to the life expectancy of the golf courses. They're well beyond their life expectancy. And so some decisions have to be made. So total acreage, just to give you an idea of each golf course. One of the things that came out in the NGF report, and we'll go in a little bit further on that, was basically you could have an option of spending $1.4 to $1.7 million on basic improvements, which really these are more Band-Aids. That doesn't fix what's really wrong with everything on the golf course. which is below the surface, what you don't see. They also provided some construction estimates. We did as well, but I remind you, those construction estimates are almost 4 years old now. So the numbers that they provided are almost, they're 3.5 years old. Okay, almost 4 years old. Like anything else, everything goes up, everything changes. Main thing they brought out was 45 holes. They felt like reducing from 63 to 45 holes, which was said repeatedly in their 100-page report. So the golf course master plan, part of that process was for us to determine what options do exist. We took into account all the information that has been made available to us from Jekyll Island, from previous studies, from the master plan. And one of the things that we felt pretty strongly about was the current courses don't align with Jekyll Island Authority's mission. Okay, as stewards of the island. I mean, there's a very delicate balance that has to happen between nature and golf, and they all can work together. But there are things such as turf reduction, minimize the aquifer flow that's coming from the air, that's pulling the irrigation water out, introducing native grasses, more environmentally sound practices make more sense and are more conducive to what Jekyll Island is. So a couple of key things I'd like to point out in the NGF assessment. Again, repeatedly they said there needs to be a reduction of golf. Repeatedly they said the conditions of the golf courses have declined, in large part due to age. One big thing is they did a study, and they asked local people, they asked people at the convention center, and there's a big disconnect between the local players and the people that come to Jekyll Island. And the disconnect is the local players are basically using it, as the NGF report says, as a municipal golf course. So that what we're seeing is they really don't want to spend a lot of money and everything's good as it is right now. And that's really just not the case. There's a lot of missed opportunities that are taking place. What we're finding out is the transient golfer is willing to pay more money to play a better golf course. Now, that doesn't mean that the rates will be increased. You know, we don't have anything to do with in regards to the operation. That will be something that has to be determined. But we're seeing a big disconnect between players. And I also will tell you that in my travels throughout the state of Georgia on other golf course properties, I talked to a number of people, and I've yet to have one person say, we like the golf courses the way they are. Everybody that I talk to, the common theme is we used to go to Jekyll, but we don't anymore because the quality of the golf courses that Jekyll is offering right now, we can get a better quality at the same price somewhere else. It's a reoccurring thing that we constantly are seeing. Again, repeatedly, I think it was over 10 times within the 100-page report, they're saying reduce the number of golf, reduce the number of golf. Now, where we differ, when I said previously on operation, okay, where we differ is the NGF made some specific comments in regards to, for example, keep the Oleander Golf Course, which is the least played golf course and the golf course that requires the most amount of work. Okay. Likewise, they also suggested looking at combining Pine Lakes, 9 holes of Pine Lakes with 9 holes of Indian Mound. Well, Pine Lakes is 18 holes. And when you look at all your golf offerings, it's the newest golf course that you have. So it'd be the least expensive to actually redo. So we differ in that because we had to take into account what Jekyll Island Authority's priorities were for the project of the master plan, which we'll look into a little bit further, what those priorities were. The NGF is also not golf course architects nor land planners. That's what we do. So that regard, I think it's very important as the first bullet point. It's expected that the results of this NGF study will be used by JIA as a guide for the future of golf and help prepare a more formal design plan of needed improvements, priority, and sequencing. Okay, that's what we do. Jekyll Island Authority objectives. Determine the correct number of holes. Financial sustainability. Right now, a golf course is being subsidized at a large number every year. Achieve maintenance sustainability. Again, when you start reducing some turf in what we would consider non-play areas, then you would be better off. Thank you. Renew and improve the golf experience. Attract a broader audience. Incorporate successful trends. Build no housing on the golf course. Keep the core golf experience, which is a great thing that Jekyll Island has with their golf courses. Limited development, low density. Maximize marketing opportunities. Create wildlife corridors of conservation. Incorporate new amenities that might not be here or expand upon them. Wetland restoration potential. Introduction of additional green space, limited retail, cost estimates. So these were all things that we had to adhere to in part of this RFP to create this plan. So we had a number of public response. I will tell you throughout this entire project, we've done a number of public presentations, and I've seen some very interesting responses. So these were based on our last presentation, which was about 2.5 weeks ago, which is the same plan that you have before you. And what we found was almost a split. If you look through it, most people said they love what's going on with the golf course, but didn't want any development. Okay. You had a couple other people that made comments that were either not for it, not against it, but might be, we'd like to see a pool within the master plan. And then you had other people that obviously do not want to see any change whatsoever. So when you look at, say, the bottom one, give us more options. The Vincent Design Group does not want to implement the NGF plan, but would rather come up with their own completely different design concept. We had criteria to meet per JIA, et cetera, where NGF was just doing a report, okay? So the recommended master plan.
Is there a breakdown of people that don't live on the island versus people that live on the island?
Yes, sir, there is. They're provided to me by Michelle. Usually there's a window they have to comment on, so we know whether they're on the island. Some people you can see are probably seasonal, come in the wintertime. So yes, we do know where people are coming from. So the recommended golf master plan. These are the opportunities the master plan brings. We are combining the dunes and Oleander course to create one 18-hole golf course. Improving Pine Lake, we're incorporating or suggesting a new 9-hole par 3 golf course. We are seeing this just be extremely successful in the golf industries with existing golf courses. There's some options which we'll go through on Indian Mountain. Create a new practice area and golf instruction center, repurpose the existing clubhouse, leave the pro shop where it is. I don't know if everybody knows, but that existing clubhouse was originally where the carts were stored. Where the restaurant and everything are right now, that was cart storage. So we would bring the carts back into what is currently the clubhouse, instead of in the barn in the back. We would also introduce the possibility of a new fitness center on the upstairs, the second floor. We would re-enhance Captain Wiley Road, introduce a boutique lodge and villas, which would be low density. We had initially, our suggestion was you would have a boutique lodge, 40 to 50 rooms, and possibly 4 villas. If you look at the master plan, there's talk about improving the existing amphitheater, which would be a good tie-in with the lodge. We would create 2 new islands for the bird rookery, and we would create a 100-foot buffer around that so that we can protect the wildlife. A low-density assisted living facility, wildlife corridors, expand trail systems, reintroduce grasslands, croquet courts, a nature amenity, community pavilion, conservation education center. So this just gives you an idea. We did multiple plans where it says concept A, B, C, D. Those were our initial concepts, and it just kind of lets you know where everything rests and how they compare. And then on the right is where the current master plan, how it compares. So we're going to look a little bit deeper into some of the components. So the golf, we have 54 holes of golf. That does include the 9-hole par 3. 2 18-hole full-size golf courses, Pine Lakes and Great Dunes. 1 9-hole regulation golf course, Indian Mound, that's the back 9. And again, we'll go through the phasing because there's going to be some options when we reach that point. 1 9-hole par 3, obviously the new practice area. Conservation areas. We've increased your conservation areas to 81.7 acres. So we're giving back Jekyll Island 81.7 acres for conservation. And some of those conservation areas could be used to reestablish maritime forests, restore wetlands. Again, I mentioned the buffer. It also helps create diversity with a habitat. Developed areas. We have 31.3 acres of developed areas. Everything falls within what is currently classified as developed. Okay. So we have 12.3 acres, which is across the street from the historic district, which we have suggested a 40 to 50 room assisted and independent living facility. Within that area, we created 4 to 5 cottages that could be installed, as well as the main building itself. The current practice area is basically a 9-acre parcel, and that's where we would locate the boutique style, low density golf lodge. And again, there would be 4 to 5 villas that could also accommodate tennis, golf tournaments, and obviously if, with the introduction of croquet, which has become very big, there's a lot of tournaments. So we think that that could be very successful. I mentioned the 100-foot buffer. We have the small 5-acre parcel located along the north side of the current Indian Mound Golf Course. It's on the very top of the plan. And that's where we had suggested a community pavilion and a nature-oriented amenity. And then lastly, there's a 5-acre parcel located along Shell Road, which could possibly be low-density retail. So the advantages, we're creating a new exciting classic golf course by combining Indian Mound and the Dunes course, improving Pine Lakes. Again, Indian Mound, we talked about par 3. We're increasing conservation by 81.7 acres. We're repurposing the existing clubhouse to meet our needs. Developing a new practice facility. The boutique lodge that's where the grill room would be. So McCormick's would be gone. So now that kind of gets Jekyll Island Authority out of operating McCormick's, and it would be operated within the Golf Lodge. And construct a low-density assisted living facility. So the phasing. We think your biggest home run is going to be to start out with combining the Great Dunes and the front nine of Oleander to create a classic style, golden age architecture 18-hole golf course. You construct a new practice area at that same time. You would always have 36 holes open, a minimum of 36 holes open for play at any one time during these phases. Phase 2, be redesigned Pine Lakes. Your Great Dunes course would be open. Your new practice area would be open. Indian Mountain would be open. Phase 3, one of the big thing is we don't want to eliminate golf. We have seen golf gain popularity during the last couple months. So we have some options on phase 3. If Spencer sees his number just exploding, well, why would we get rid of golf? So phase 3, again, there's a couple options and it will be determined at that time what's your best course of action. But one would be you could build just the 9-hole par 3 golf course. Another option is you could redo Indian Mountain, 9 holes. And a third option is you could just keep Indian Mountain, redesign it and keep all 18 holes and you would end up back at 63 holes. So there's some options on phase 3. So the following slides we'll go through fairly quickly, but it's an idea of what we see, our vision for the Great Dunes. And there's been questions, oh, how can you combine Oleander with Great Dunes? Well, you can do it with tree. These are the same style, the same look, it just has some trees, but it can be combined. Pine Lakes, again, these photos are really showing reducing turf along tees. You're maintaining turf, large areas of turf that you don't need. And when you maintain them, you're irrigating them, you're fertilizing them, etc. And that's a cost associated with that. So we can help bring those costs more in line with what we're talking about doing, as well as incorporating plants. Par 3 course, again, this has gotten really big. The beauty of that is at Jekyll Island, you have older people, you have young people, you have people that don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the golf course. And this allows you to actually go out and play. We're seeing a lot of success with this on a lot of golf courses. One example that I have used was the Cradle Golf Course at Pinehurst. And I think they're charging a new 9-hole par 3 golf course. Actually, the picture on the top is of the Cradle Golf Course. They're charging $50 a day and you play as much as you want. They have music piped in the trees, so there's music. They have food trucks out there, and these guys are just, again, I know we're not Pinehurst, but everywhere I've incorporated this on other projects, and the success has just been phenomenal. So it's a missed opportunity is what I see for Jekyll Island, especially when you consider young, old, everybody that you have that come to enjoy Jekyll Island. Indian Mound, again, these are just conceptual photos of what we're talking about reducing turf. Right now we have turf from tree line to tree line. So cost estimates. People have to understand, working with an existing golf course, you have no idea what you're going to run into. These are rough cost estimates. If you were to upgrade your golf courses, but leave them as they are right now. So you're looking at a total price of about $21,739,000 is the estimate for 63 holes as they are right now. If we implement the master plan, because you're reducing golf, you're reducing turf, you could implement the master plan from a low end, meaning that if you just did the par 3 course, as well as the Dunes course, Pine Lakes golf course, you're looking anywhere from $15 to $18 million. Those are new golf courses. And what everybody needs to understand, again, is like estimates that were provided by the NGF, those are almost 4 years old. To give you an idea of where things are in the golf industry, to give you an example, irrigation. When you price out irrigation right now, your suppliers are holding their quote for 7 to 10 days. After that, the quote changes because fuel is what drives a golf course on pipe, et cetera. So things change. So examples, I think many of you have seen this in the previous presentations of repurposing the existing clubhouse, enhanced entrance at Captain Wiley Ray. We want a sense of arrival. When you get there, it's just a 2-lane road. So we're trying to create a sense of arrival. Golf lodge and villas, again, low density, clustered. Assisted living, main facility with a cluster group of 5 to 6 independent villas, low density development. And what drove all the development areas to the back 9 of Oleander is, number one, that's one of your most problematic golf courses. It's one of your least played golf courses. And when we look at it, the infrastructure is already there. So if you look at the development, all that development's right along that road because that's what makes the most sense. We didn't want to put it in the northern side part of the site because we didn't want to have it back up to existing residences. Again, introduce more green space by the introduction of 81.7 conservation acres. Create nature amenities in that 5-acre parcel on the northern part of the site. So as we move forward, planning, there needs to be additional planning design that will be required, including more evaluations, archaeological, determine final phasing, funding, what funds are available for the project. Conservation and planning, how can we integrate conservation efforts and introduce new elements? Explore partnerships and define the time frame. So I would like to say, after 10 months, our experience working with Jekyll Island Authority, Jones, Aaron, Spencer, Michelle, everyone here, our experience has been tremendous. We think everybody on the island has been just fabulous to work with. Ben, Noel, we've just had a really good time exploring what opportunities exist. And there are some tremendous amount of opportunities here for Jekyll. And we just feel you're kind of missing it right now. We know something has to be done. And it's really going to be determined, you know, which direction you guys want to go. So with that, is there any questions that I might be able to answer?
Couple, and you might have said it and I might have just didn't hear it, but if we make these modifications or improvements, what do you estimate that would do to the number of rounds or projected revenue?
If you implement the new plan, is that what you mean?
Yes.
The master plan? We have not run projection, but I'll tell you this, just purely on data that you know that's out there when if you're a golfer and you look at people flocking to play classic golf courses. And that's why we say the easiest thing would be to combine the front 9 of Oleander and the Dunes course. You're going to have people that are going to come play. It's a new golf course. And like I said, in my travels, you know, there are guys that go on golf trips, and there are ladies that go on golf trips, and they're bypassing Jekyll now. We're missing them, and we need to bring them back. And the other beauty is with this building right here, you know, you are in a prime spot to make this thing work, but you just got to reassess it. And why we say that's your best first phase is because you're going to get PR for free. When you build a new classic golf course, your marketing is going to take off, but you're going to get a lot of free PR from it.
From an efficiency standpoint, how much in maintenance is going to be saved by having a reduced area?
Well, now that's a fine line, because right now you're currently operating 63 holes, well below what your normal standards would be for a maintenance budget. So even though you're reducing turf, if you reduce golf, your maintenance is probably going to come more in line of what it should be. I don't know the number, the budget number right offhand, but it doesn't mean that your maintenance budget's going to go down. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to go up, but you don't want to make the investment. And Aaron's done a fabulous job. I've said this over and over again with the small staff that he has. But when you reduce turf, they're not spending as much time on a piece of equipment, and then they can start working on the details. Right now, I think it's all they can do just to keep the grass mowed. So that doesn't necessarily mean your maintenance budget goes down, because again, your expectations with a new golf course is you want to see them maintained well. So when you start looking at hole reductions, that starts bringing things more into line.
So do y'all provide a pro forma on what you would estimate performance to be with the improvements?
No.
Okay.
That wasn't part of what we're doing. We will do a final report based on our findings and a detail of what's going on with the plan after we're done with this presentation.
Some of that information, Mr. Gross, will be found in the National Golf Foundation report, because they were looking at operations more. And Troy and his team, if you look at the RFP for the master plan, it was to be the blueprint for the future of golf. And if you take that analogy and you think of it in terms of the master plan that we're operating under right now for the island, that's the blueprint, the concept for the island. It doesn't mean that we haven't had to make adjustments and changes, because obviously I would doubt very seriously, and I would doubt that Troy would stand there and think that everything that he has recommended would be exactly as it would be. So there will definitely be some adjustments there, I would say.
Absolutely. And again, if you're not familiar with the NGF report, they did a breakdown, which is helpful, and at least it provides you with a guideline. Mm-hmm. Where if you had 63 holes, if you had 45 holes, so they did a breakdown of budgets, et cetera.
Yeah.
To Mr. Gross's point of cost of maintenance, what do you anticipate maintenance costs would do to maintain our current facility? Do you see them remaining stable, or do you see that as an required increase? Or
if you maintained your facility exactly the way it is right now?
I'm saying in order to maintain a playable facility like they are right now, what sort of cost are we looking at? Are we looking at increasing costs, decreasing costs, stable costs? Your estimate.
If you were going to maintain what you have right now, you're already operating below. I know that last I knew, there were 16 people on staff for 63 holes. That's 16 people. It's usually a 118-hole golf course. You have 63. So it's well below where you need to be. That's why I say what Aaron can do right now is amazing just for 63 holes. And Jones, you might be able to interject a little bit. I know that there were some conversations in regards to the maintenance budget, and it was adjusted, I think, after the NGF report came out. But again, I don't know. And it depends on the level you want to maintain.
Well, and some of the things, Mr. Kruger, that we've done is just what you voted on earlier today. For instance, improved equipment. If you remember, it had been a long time before we got to the point of leasing equipment that we had any new equipment on the golf courses. So we've moved in a more efficient manner. It's just that everyone agrees, whether it's Troy or whether it's National Golf Foundation, that we've got more golf holes than we are presently able to maintain to a proper level. Obviously, it's the board decision. If you want to continue with the budget we have, then that's your decision. And golf can continue just like it is, or you will have options as far as looking at different possibilities.
I'm not suggesting that.
No, sir, I didn't think you were.
I'm suggesting that we're reaching a situation with our golf where it's simply going to continue to decline. We're going to have to take courses out of play, that we can't maintain what we've got at the level we're maintaining them and have viable golf on this island.
Well, it's not only maintaining them, but you're not, if you look at the data, the number of rounds you're doing, you're not even doing enough rounds to sustain it.
So that's
Right.
part of my point as well. I mean,
Right.
we're either going to have golf or we're not.
So that's why reduction, I think, is necessary. I think golf is part of the history here at Jekyll Island. When you look at the Dunes course, when you look at, Walter Travis, and, that's a part of history of Jekyll Island. And I think one that everybody is proud of. Unfortunately, it's seen better days.
I believe the commissioner has a question.
Yeah, this is probably for Jones, because I'm not a golfer. Do we charge the same for every course currently?
We have green fees that are, well, not for Great Dunes, the 9-hole course, that's a different fee, but for the others, yes, sir.
And then to Troy, just generally, because I know you didn't get into that part of it, but do you see other places that have multiple course charge different fees, different levels for a round for 9
I
or
do,
18?
I do. And I've spoken with Spencer and Jones, and, to me, I've seen a lot of people be creative in the last couple of years in regards to golf. A facility like this, or I'll give you an example. I'm working on another project. It's a municipal golf course. And what they're doing, same thing. You had members that didn't want to see anything happen because they thought they were going to have to pay more money. And so what they did, for example, is they said, okay, we're going to honor what you're paying right now. But the day we put the shovel in the ground, if you don't have a membership, that price is going to change. Same thing they're doing is basically they took and drew a line. If you're within 10 miles, you pay one price. And if you're outside that, it's something different. So, and I think Spencer would agree that right now, because of the current state of the golf courses, the fact that they're being subsidized, which is not uncommon, but to the amount they're being subsidized is, that you can be creative in how you want to do your fees, your fee structure. I mean, obviously, if it's somebody that lives on an island, you're going to give them, I think, your best price. But you have to be a little bit more creative on how you do it versus one flat fee.
Well, I don't know if I don't know that today we get into dynamic pricing, but I think the commissioner's question's a good one, because obviously that's something that will need to be looked at. And the criteria that would be used, it could be a host of things, because if one of these courses ended up being a course that is more competitively designed, then that course may be more expensive to play than another course. And a par 3 course would certainly not be the same price as Troy mentioned, one price to play all day with music in the trees and that sort of thing. That's a totally different experience than somebody who's looking for a serious golf experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's not uncommon to see a
that's
different
what
structure for like a classic golf course. Like if you go to Mammoth Dunes, which is up north, yeah, that you're going to pay more for one course versus the other course there. It's not uncommon.
Noel, you had a comment there?
Mr. Kruger, I have some insight to your question. Let's take Great Dunes, for example. They're still working on an irrigation system that was installed in 1972. I think I was 5 years old. So it was only updated in 1985, and we haven't done anything with that irrigation system since 1985. So the question about can we just maintain what we have, the answer to that is no. Something needs to be done. The grasses on Pine Lakes were installed in 2001, and they've far outlived their life expectancy by 5 to 8 years. So we can keep cutting grass, but we still have that big bubble of deferred maintenance that's sitting out there looming over us that needs to be addressed either incrementally or at one time. And you're right, we would have to shut down holes to be able to accomplish that, or courses to accomplish that. And it would take a lot of money. And you might wind up nickel and diming yourself into recreating the same golf course, but you could have had a better experience if you just went and did the thing wholesale. I believe it helps clarify something you were trying to get to, sir.
Kind of to my point, we need to make a decision, we're going to have golf or not.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions?
Couple of comments about this. I've been playing golf on Jekyll Island for probably 40 years, and it's one of the greatest places that I enjoy playing. But, and I commend you on this report. I wasn't sure what kind of product that we would get to, because you're exactly right. There's some people who live here who don't want to see any changes. And there's also the need to market the golf course in such a way that draw people here. And that's probably not exactly happening, and some things have got to be done to get there. But there's some outstanding elements within this plan that really get to both sides of that issue.
Absolutely.
And so I really commend that element of it. I think it's been said, as I'm kind of hearing underlying, that people like Aaron and Spencer, who've been here a lot, they've been able to contribute to this and give their feedback, along with Jones, who see the money numbers. So I hope that's been the case, but
Absolutely.
overall, you've got some great concepts in here that ought to be the best of both worlds for get older people who want to play par 3 golf for 2 hours a day. And as well as those people who want to come here and stay in hotels or potentially lodging and stay for 3 or 4 days and get lots of good golf in, even being willing to pay a little bit more than what we currently pay to play golf on Jekyll Island.
Thank you.
And Dr. Evans, as a result of the changes, then Troy had indicated, once you begin to make movement, then there would be a marketing response, just that would almost be organic. And then, of course, our marketing folks would absolutely be able to take it and be more proactive, because right now it's very difficult to market golf on Jekyll and be competitive with some of the other areas for golfing groups. But you've raised a lot of good points, and what will happen now is in your packets that you received prior to this meeting, you received all the latest comments that were received from the last public meeting. You've received all of those comments over the past 10 months. And Troy will have a final report to you, not another presentation, but a final written report. And also then my intention is to begin to massage some of the data and pull some of it together, because you remember that there are 3 components to this now. It was the National Golf Foundation study. Then we issued a request for information where we had over 20 proposals that came in with different ideas. And then is when we decided that it would make a lot of sense to do an overall conceptual master plan, which is now what's being completed. So now my idea, or my direction that I think based on what we've talked about, is to go back and pull all that together so that you can then begin to have information where you can make good decisions, and we'll have obviously more discussion about this whole scenario. But it's interesting because I know a couple of comments were like, how are they going to do that when they don't have a budget this year? Well, we don't. There is no money allocated for this right now and no time frame.
And that's why we're not taking action. today.
Yes, sir.
We're not taking action.
So, but stay tuned, because this will not be the final discussion as far as getting the board members now to determine the direction we go from here. And obviously, when you do decide that it's time for us to issue an RFP, then that's the reason I say that this will serve as a blueprint, because once a RFP comes in, just like with the convention center or a hotel that may have been built, that's when things change as far as, the size, the number of rooms, the whatever. And so we have to be open to that.
Jones, we have a budget deficit of around 700. Is it still around 700 on the golf course?
I think it's a little less than that right now. No, if you got that, it's a little less than that, but yes, between 6 and 675.
I think that you've got some great information. We have some great information now to be able to do some financial modeling. And when I say come up with a way, it will help us figure out a way to finance this, or to justify it, into downstream revenues that would be generated from it, that could ultimately, it may be cash negative, meaning not cost us any more money if we can create more revenue from it. So anyway.
We hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you. And
Thank you very much for your time.
Very much appreciate it. As you all know, I spent my career in Coca-Cola International, and we followed the guidelines of the British Foreign Service. Always go to the bathroom when you have an opportunity. Never tell a lie when a half-truth will do. But I'm going to have us take a 5-minute break. And let's look at the time. So 11:13, 11:20. We'll be back here.
Thank you. You're sweet. Thank you.
Right.
I got a lot of talk. You do. Hi, how are you?
I guess the auto processing plants and stuff like that. Yeah, power demand. Yeah, all the power demand. Once you started doing that. I think we're going to start on the other end.
Hey, Mr. Williams, how you been? How's the family?
Dale, are you on the phone? Glenn, are you still on the phone?
Yes, sir. I'm here, Jones. I was on mute.
Okay. Dale, are you now on the phone?
That's what I was told. Okay, we're going to come back into order, please. You'd please take your seats.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
An opportunity to do something else, so.
Okay.
So Dale's not,
No, sir, but,
Trip is,
no, Trip's not, but Glenn is.
Glenn. All right.
She's going to try and reach Dale.
We will come back into order, please. Thank you. We're still in the committee of the whole. And the next item, false alarms, 0-2020-3. It's the second reading in consideration of adoption. Where is my lawyer? Oh, Counselor.
She's ahead of you, Mr. Chairman.
Always, I hope so. Melissa, if you will present.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
This is the second reading and consideration of adoption for the false alarm ordinance, as you previously said. We had the first reading last month. We put this up on the website for public comment. This, as we discussed last month, arose out of, we have some serious issues on the island, mainly with commercial, not really with residential, of our fire department responding to false alarms. And it takes, Mr. Gailey will tell you more, but it takes resources away where it's not truly needed. And we felt it was appropriate, like other jurisdictions across the country, to institute this ordinance. One public comment was received on two matters. The one issue was the commenter felt that the fines were too high, and there was a concern about the fines being levied against residential rental owners. That is really, Mr. Gailey will speak more to this, but that has not been an issue thus far. And there was no, I could not find any differing penalties in other jurisdictions between commercial developments and residential rentals. So you have three options before you. You can not adopt the ordinance. You can adopt the ordinance. You can suggest other alternatives. I will have Mr. Gailey speak before you take a vote.
Good morning, board members. Appreciate y'all taking this up to discuss again today. As I said last meeting, the fire alarms on Jekyll Island are very important and integral to our response here on the island, given our circumstances. So prior to our discussions and bringing this forth, we were having a lot of fire alarms, and those were beginning to get out of control as far as those were lack of maintenance and becoming nuisances to false alarms. So even since we've been bringing this document forward and it's been known to the public through the readings, we have seen a reduction in some compliance in our fire alarms drastically, particularly in one property. So obviously, in my mind, the spirit of the ordinance is working already, and it's yet to even be passed. So what I'd like to say is also too, I read the public comments that were submitted and questions and dialogue with the staff. In regards to the fines, I think my opinion in the discussion of the fines, they are slightly higher, proposed to be higher. And I think part of my thought process on that was to have an alarm system that's is faulty and producing false alarms. Obviously, there is an expense in getting those repaired, and these fines were categorically slightly higher than the cost to get them repaired. So if you had to choose to just have a derelict system and pay the fines, it would probably be cheaper to do that than to fix the system. So that may have been in the spirit of the discussion there, but certainly y'all could decide what's the pleasure of the board on those. And of course, we do have a large rental population here. We do have discretion built into the ordinance.
And we, burnt food, for example, is not necessarily a false alarm in itself, but when you're cooking food and you continue to have false alarms based off of maybe poor construction methods or inoperable equipment, that gets into more of the nuisance we're trying to address, not an accidental, just, hey, I'm new here and didn't realize how the microwave worked or the stove worked. Those are far and few between, and our discretion is certainly built in on that clause. So not to belabor the point, but if any board member has any questions, I'd certainly like to address them.
Dr. Evans?
Sir.
No questions. Thank you. Thank you. Melissa, I want to make sure, so I know we have, that some board members want to amend the motion to, as I understand, from $1,000 to 500. Wouldn't I
Okay.
need a motion first and then have it amended?
Well, you could do it in one motion. You could move to adopt the proposed ordinance with the following revisions, whatever the board would like to revise.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make that motion if you would.
So just going to ask Dr. Evans.
Okay. Yes, I would make the motion that the false alarm ordinance be approved with the following changes. In section 1, lines 88, 89, and 90, penalties assessed for the third false alarm be set at $150. The fourth false alarm be set at $300, and violations after the fourth false alarm be set at $500.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion as amended will signify by saying, and I want to do a roll call, please.
Yes, sir.
Will signify by saying aye.
Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.
Aye.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams. Miss Joy Birch Meeks.
Aye.
Mr. Tripp Tollison.
He's not on the phone. He had to leave.
Yes, sir. Dr. Buster Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Aye.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
He had to leave.
He had to leave.
Yeah, I got a message. He might be on the phone. I apologize.
No, that's not, I thought he
The
was
vote
still
is
on.
unanimous of those present.
Thank you. Any other action there, Counselor? I think we can.
That completes the false alarm ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Then we now have the revisions to Jekyll Island Authority Board bylaws and other policies. Counselor?
Yes, sir. I was tasked at the very beginning of my employment here to relook at these bylaws, and I have been able to do that this summer. It's a good idea. These bylaws were, well, there are two things. We're looking at your bylaws and sections of the policy manual to revise. So there are two separate things, but the bylaws are contained in the policy manual. They were portions of these were last updated in 2018. It's a good idea to look every couple of years and just review them and see if anything needs tightening up. Just to see, is the policy matching the actual practice? For instance, for a long time, we were using emails, but that wasn't a proper way in the bylaws to notify you because they hadn't been updated in 20 years. So that was one of the changes they made in 2018. So it's just a good general tightening up of some things that are going on. There are multiple revisions. Some of them are just grammatical. Some are, making things more concise. They say almost the same thing. It's just more concise. Some are clarifying authorities and responsibilities with the board and the executive director. And I'm happy to go through these one by one, or I can take any specific questions.
Whatever you feel most comfortable.
Chairman, Mr. Jones, do you have any preference?
Mr. Chair, are you okay if, I know board members received this ahead of time.
They did.
And it's specifically to the board. It's not beyond. And these are similar to when Dr. Evans and Ms. Johnson present updates to the HR policies. I think that, there are a couple of places here where you might say, oh, wait, there's a change there. But then when you read on, you realize, oh, that just was moving something from one page because it read better to put it like 5 pages back. And specifically there, I'm thinking of the fact that our treasurer or secretary doesn't actually keep the seal of the organization,
Right.
but that's kept in my office. And so we just thought, well, it's really not the practice for that to be in Mr. Gross's possession. So we should change that so that it actually says that. So that's one of the changes. Melissa, was there something else that was like that or of significance? I suppose the notice that we would actually be able to call a regular meeting in consultation with the chair in 3 calendar days rather than 5 calendar days. That we felt like was important based on giving us a little more flexibility. But obviously, that would be at the chair's discretion to call a meeting.
And Mr. Hooks, if I could jump in there.
Sure.
The reason we changed it to 3 is because the bylaws actually require we set our meetings in advance, a year in advance. So that's not an issue. The bylaws call for the agenda to be distributed along with the notice of, or at a certain period of time. So in keeping with the actual practice, we're not going to submit your agenda, a year in advance. So that was one of kind of those tightening up things that we did.
Right. Okay. Is there a motion to recommend adoption of the revisions to Jekyll Island Authority Board bylaws and other policies as recommended by staff? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion. Chair hears none. Once again, I want to do a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.,
Aye.
Mr. Bob Kruger,
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross,
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams,
Aye.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks,
Aye.
Mr. Tripp Tollison, not present, Dr. Buster Evans,
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard, Mr. Dale Atkins. Of those present, the vote is unanimous.
Thank you. Motion passes. The next is the master plan amendment, Georgia Power Substation, authorizing notice of proposed amendment to be sent. I need Noel and Melissa to present. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'll let Melissa speak to the legalese behind this master plan amendment. But this master plan amendment stems from the project that Georgia Power just recently completed by upgrading the power lines and the poles to bring power to Jekyll Island from 46 kilovolts to 115 kilovolts. And they had always said that eventually that they would upgrade our substation here and give us more reliable power. And since we only have one substation on the island with 0 redundancy, it's pretty important. But it come to fruition, we would have to have a master plan amendment to give them some more square footage to be able to put the equipment And we're happy to have Diallo Cartwright from Georgia Power here today. I'm gonna let him go through a couple of the specifics as to why and what, and then we'll get back to the legal aspect of it with Melissa.
Thank you. And welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Joel, for inviting me here today, and good morning, everybody on the board. To summarize what Noel just said is that it's a little bit more than just upgrading the substation, because we always knew that we were planning to upgrade the substation, but the project is it's just one part of the puzzle. So without getting into the specifics, with the growth that is just happening in the area, we identified a contingency issue that will, within the next 3 years. So basically, if something were to fail at a substation at another location, then Jekyll Island would be in pretty much a loss of power. So there was many different things that we can look through, but the decision was made to, instead of putting temporary fixes that would only last for 10 to 15 years, why not invest in the 115 kV substation now? So that's pretty much the need for us putting in the new 115 kV substation on Jekyll Island. Are there any questions, or was that too?
I tell you what, for the record, would you give us your full name and title?
Okay, my full name is Diallo Cartwright, Area Manager for Brunswick area.
Georgia Power.
Georgia Power, yes.
Thank you so much. You can tell I'm kind of a stickler. I chaired ethics for 12 years.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right.
All right. Is there a motion to recommend the submittal of the proposed master plan amendment for the Georgia Power substation to the required entities as recommended by staff? Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And any further discussion? Commissioner?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear from the attorney on, just briefly on the process.
Yes, sir, Commissioner, thank you. So this would require a master plan amendment to convert undeveloped area to developed land under the master plan, similar to exactly like what we did last year with the Jekyll Island Campground and the public safety complex. So this would, goodness gracious. So in the Georgia statute allows us to convert no more than 1,675 acres of total land of Jekyll Island into developed land. As of January 2014, 1,597 acres had already been deemed developed. So that leaves us 77 acres that we can, by law, convert from undeveloped to developed and still remain within that the acreage set by law. We took a couple of acres last year for the public safety complex and 12 for the campground. This will be approximately 2.59 acres that we are looking to convert. And then the plan is for Georgia Power to return what will be the unused land where the current substation sits, turn it back to Jekyll Island, revert leasehold interest back to Jekyll Island, and we plan to reconvert it back to undeveloped land.
Any questions?
So before you today is the next step in the process is to submit the proposed amendment to several state authorities to put them on notice. Then we will have a public hearing, which is currently set for October 6, 2020 from 5 to 6 p.m. at the Convention Center. This will also be posted online and available for public comment there. Then we will plan to vote on this in December. If no objection is received by the state, or if the chairman doesn't receive any objection from the Legislative Oversight Committee, then we can vote on it in December.
Also, I think you should note that in the current master plan, this particular request does fall within one of the categories which is allowed. And that is, this conversion is critical conversion to protect the public health and safety of our residents. Because if in fact we have a full power failure on Jekyll Island, then obviously we have issues as far as public safety for the residents. So it absolutely falls right within the parameters of the master plan and is within the limitations of what was intended in the master plan.
I'm going to call for a vote. Roll call, please.
Thank you,
Do we
sir.
have authority, or does this have to go through the State Properties Commission as well?
I'm
for a
sorry,
vote?
Commissioner, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Does this have to go through the State Properties Commission as well?
It does not.
Okay. We're given that legislative authority.
Now, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.
Aye.
I'm sorry. Do you have the motion in a second?
We had a motion by Mr. Kruger and a second by Mr. Gross.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bob Kruger.
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Aye.
Miss Joy Birch Meeks. Dr. Buster Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Aye.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Aye.
Of those present, it is unanimous.
Thank you. And I would remind everyone, we still have a quorum easily. Okay. The next I need, let's see, engineering and installation design of new slide complex for Summer Waves Water Park. Noel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If you remember back in February, earlier this year, we presented the board with a plan to purchase a slide complex that was worth $1.2 million, and it was only 2 years old, from a water park and pooler that was shut down and was being dismantled. And you allowed us to purchase that for $100,000, so it was a considerable savings. We've since taken it down with a contractor, and we have it here on island, and it's sitting at Summer Waves, fenced off in the back corner, ready to be erected. And what we did was we put in the original fiscal 21 budget the money to engineer and some seed money to get this thing installed, and that was removed due to the COVID-19 response. So in a more phased approach, we received some quotes from some engineering groups, and wet engineering wound up being a huge cost savings. They did the original engineering on this exact slide complex in Pooler, so they're familiar with it. They had all the plans, they had all the blueprints already. And this would be one of the first steps to have the new attraction available for Summer Waves next season. And that would be the goal, is to not let the thing sit there for a year or a year and a half really, and wait till the following year. We had planned all along to have it ready to go, just like with Shark's Tooth Cove a few years ago for that opening season. So getting some engineering, geotechnical analysis, and installation design done would allow us to be able to price how much it's going to cost to put it up in the air beyond just an estimate that we had originally, which was $430,000 to $480,000 in total, including this engineering. So this phase of that amount would be for us to provide the engineering to where we could decide whether or not it makes sense for us to try to do concrete footers in-house. Do we do the electrical in-house? How do we value engineer some money out of that cost? So what we're asking for is, staff is asking for a request for capital expenditure of $67,775 for geotechnical analysis, engineering design, and installation design of the new Summer Wave slide complex and splash pad extension. The splash pad extension was given to us for free when we went up to Pooler. The owners were so glad that we were dismantling this and getting it out of the park because they want to build 2 new hotels. They gave us a whole splash pad full of equipment So we can also integrate that in our current splash pad for the little kids. So that was also a good investment.
Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend approval of the funds requested for engineering and installation design of the new slide complex for Summer Waves Park as recommended by staff? Need a
So moved.
motion? I need a motion.
Motion.
Oh, Bill, thank you, Mr. President. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Chair hears none. I'm going to call for a vote. Roll call, please.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson Jr.
Aye.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks.
Aye.
Dr. Buster Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Aye.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Aye.
Of those present, it is unanimous.
Thank you. Noel, you still up?
Yes, sir. Thank you,
All
Mr.
right.
Chairman.
This is the resolution to accept Georgia Department of Transportation contract for Jekyll Island Airport R 2020-4. Noel?
Yes, sir. This resolution is an authorization to accept a contract for electrical rehabilitation, pavement rejuvenation, and remarking at the Jekyll Island Airport. The State Park Authority will receive a contract from Georgia Department of Transportation to provide reimbursement for the costs associated with the electrical rehab, pavement rejuvenation, and remarking in maximum amount of $460,767.90. Of that dollar amount, $437,743.25 will be provided by FAA funds. There's also a $23,024.55 match from the state. And along with that, there's a required local match of only $7,095.10. So just to give you some perspective, since 2016, we've had including this project, we've had $1.06 million worth of investment at the Jekyll Island Airport. And including this job right here, you've thankfully been able to approve only a $55,142 match to get the $1.6 million worth of work done. So it's been a very good investment partnering with GDOT and the FAA to make this happen. So this resolution is asking for the State Park Authority to authorize the chairman, the attorney, the executive director, and staff to sign such documents that may be necessary to complete this project, and to furthermore authorize the contract match available budgeted funds, and to further authorize the executive director to sign on behalf of the chairman any such documents or contracts necessary to complete this project. And there's a reason for that. The FAA runs on a different fiscal year, which you all know, and October 1st is the beginning of a new one. So we have to be under contract by September 30th to go ahead and have these funds available. If we're not under contract by September 30th, well, then we lose these funds. And that would be a terrible thing for us to happen. GDOT has assured us that they can get us the contract and they write the contract before then. And you're authorizing in a resolution to be able to have the chairman or his designee, which would be Jones, to be able to sign that contract to release these federal and state funds to us along with our match.
Thank you. Okay, I need a motion. Is there a motion to recommend adoption of R 2020-4 resolution to accept the Georgia Department of Transportation's GDOT contract for Jekyll Island Airport as recommended by staff?
Make a motion to be approved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'm going to call for a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson Jr.
Aye.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks.
Aye.
Dr. Buster Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Aye.
Mr. Dale Atkins. Of those present, it is unanimous.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP. The application scope change letter, Jones Hooks will present.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, we received a grant from the Federal Transportation Department earlier in 2016. The amount was $312,500, and that was for the beginning of a bike path onto the causeway. And that project, when it was first envisioned, was for the bike path to go from the Jekyll Bridge all the way to the Jekyll Welcome Center. Unfortunately, by the time all of the engineering requirements were met that were required by federal DOT, the actual construction, there was not enough monies left in the construction to actually get it to the Welcome Center. So right now we have an infamous bike path really to nowhere. And so we have been struggling with this and trying to find a way to get the bike path tied at least to the Welcome Center, but hopefully beyond that and as part of the Georgia Greenway, the bike Greenway. So we submitted back to DOT. We did get approved, as some of you will recall, about a year ago. We got approved to submit for another grant. I was a little hesitant because I thought, my goodness, you know, if we can't even get to the Welcome Center, then what will this do? But we have been going down this path, and the most recent issue that surfaced through the Transportation Alternatives Program was that the path being 10 feet wide, when it would, if and when it would get to the Cedar Creek Bridge, which is the first bridge on the Jekyll Causeway, that there would not be enough space there, enough shoulder for the path to cross. And so they got in touch with me and said, would you like to build a new bridge, or would you like to build just a pedestrian bridge? Or would you like to expand the existing bridge or build a pedestrian bridge just for the bike path? And I said, neither. That's going to be extremely expensive. Contacted DOT and said, we need help. We need to figure this thing out, because if 8 feet wide is what the national standard for bike paths is, and that's what all of our new bike paths on the island are, then why should this one be 10 feet wide? Because it's not like we're looking for folks with baby carriages and all to be going out there for a stroll. And so DOT supported the idea of making the bike path only 8 feet wide. And so the coordinator for the national program has said, yes, we could do that if in fact the JIA were to come back with a revision in the scope, so that we would not be referring to it as a multi-purpose path that would be 10 feet wide, but instead it would be a bike path that would be 8 feet wide. And so that's what this request is, but it does require board action for federal DOT consideration as far as moving the project hopefully forward for additional funding.
Thank you. Is there a motion to recommend the Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP, application scope change letter as recommended by staff? Need a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and second. Any other discussion? Do a roll call, please. Call for a vote.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph B. Wilkinson, Jr.
Aye.
Mr. Bob Kruger.
Aye.
Mr. Bill Gross.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Williams.
Aye.
Ms. Joy Birch Meeks.
Aye.
Dr. Buster Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Glenn Willard.
Aye.
Mr. Dale Atkins.
Aye.
Of those present, it is unanimous, sir.
Great. Thank you. Motion carries. We now move to the Executive Director's report. Jones Hooks.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try and be brief. I realize time is running on.
Oh, Sally is already here, so don't worry.
The first issue, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring to the board's attention is one that has just occurred. As all of you know who deal with a computer, and everyone around this table does, ransomware is a type of software that's designed specifically to damage or gain unauthorized access to a computer system. And unfortunately, that situation is one that we have faced now at the authority. I regret to inform you that we became infected last Thursday by such an attack, or inflicted, and that all of our computer systems, this was not just within a department, were impacted. And it's a very serious situation. It's much more than just interruption of the internet or anything like that. It's much bigger than just someone surfing the web who happened on a bad site. This is an intentional situation that has broken through all of our firewalls, all of our encryptions, pretty much as far as passwords. And the good news is, however, that a few years ago, we made the decision to go with a third-party provider of IT services rather than just having IT within the JIA, because we realized that our needs were beginning to be much larger than what we could afford to address. And I will tell you that Coastal Computers, who is our provider, they have done an excellent job in isolating and stopping the attack, restoring our functionality and recovery, and also cleanup. Now, everything's not complete. We're about 90+% back to normal. However, obviously, there are going to be additional norms that will become routine after this. I am very pleased to report, however, that yesterday and in all of our communications with the state, and yesterday on a Zoom call where there were many parties from the state represented, that our IT provider was able to answer every question and provide the information that was asked for. And that the good news is, and Marjorie and I talked about this, and Jenna, the good news is that that we were in line with all the state protocols, because if we hadn't been, then I think we would have been in a very precarious situation. And I'm pleased that the state has obviously taken this very seriously. They are working with us, and they are providing the support and any additional assistance that we may need as far as going forward. Unfortunately, they have indicated that situations like this usually are situations where the perpetrators are either caught or continue on with the situation, unless they at some point decide that there's a more fertile victim somewhere else. I will tell you, we have now been contacted by the perpetrators. And at this time, however, we are uncertain of their demands. We're continuing to follow, however, the protocols that the state has told us to follow, and responding to the criminals, and we will continue down that path. At this point, I think everything that can be done has been done, and unfortunately, it was a very, very bad weekend strategically for this to happen, because we had major events over at the golf course and the tennis center this weekend. Marjorie, anything you'd like to add to that, you or Jenna? We are still assessing any kind of information disclosure that may be of concern. But obviously, we're working with our vendor on that. But we feel pretty confident right now in the position that we're in. But I did need to bring this to your attention. We'll certainly keep you updated. But that's the latest at this point. The chairman and I have discussed that even though the earlier calendar this year, we had consolidated a November, December meeting, we would like to request to go ahead and include a November and December meeting, even if they were to be remote, because obviously there's a lot of business that has kind of gotten concentrated as a result of all of the months whenever we were dealing so actively with the COVID situation. And so if board members would be agreeable, the chairman and I have discussed going ahead with a November meeting, which would be the third Tuesday, which would be November the 17th. And then at that point, we would be able to determine based on the public hearings that you have now put into place this morning and that sort of thing, if there were to be a need also for a December meeting. If there were to be a need for a December meeting, we would keep it, as was earlier discussed, not the third Tuesday, but keep it on December the 8th. So it would be earlier in the month. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you have any comment on that, but.
No, I'm very grateful for working through this. And if you all wish to discuss it with us, let me know. But I think we're going to go ahead and make those changes. And we will send out appropriate notification to you all and, of course, to others involved, including the public.
Very quickly, just a couple of other things. We have now received the entire $2.3 million of special local option sales tax from Glenn County. And we are going to be moving forward very quickly now with the final projects that have been discussed previously and approved. The scope there will be the small parking nodes that are advocated in the capacity study, so that we end up with additional parking areas around the island and small venue improvements around the island. Those would include the North Riverview Drive three-way stop area, Driftwood Beach parking, St. Andrews Beach parking improvements, and then a pull-off at the airport. And so those will be moving forward with requests for bids there, hopefully before the end of this week, so that we can get those projects finalized and move them forward. Also, our beach crossovers continue to make great progress there. And I think it's important to realize that now 10 out of our 15 T streets have open crossovers. And that is more than Jekyll Island has ever had. And the others are, we're just waiting on final designs and also the actual wood package for some of the crossover construction to continue. But next up will be Stewart and Austin, based on which one actually comes in first. We do have an update of the crossover construction on our website, and we encourage everyone interested to keep following the updates there. This has been a tremendous undertaking. You know, it is tied back to the revetment project and to to the actual protection of the dune fields that have been put in as a result of the revetment. So it's a very significant project, and it's also interesting to note that Austin, Tyler, and Bliss will be 3 crossovers that will have ADA access to an overlook area. And so we're continuing to be mindful of ADA access. One other thing that's very important is it's very significant that we have been informed by the Bureau of the Census that Jekyll Island will be a census designated place as a result of this census. That is very significant because in the past, we've always had to extrapolate data to try and figure out any kind of census information on Jekyll Island. So this is going to be very important. So we certainly encourage everyone to either on Jekyll or off Jekyll to complete your census information if you have not. Also, one last thing, or 2 quick things, our FY21 strategic plan and the projects that we discussed earlier today were submitted by the deadline of September the 1st. And also this weekend, as I alluded to earlier, we had U.S. Kids Golf, as well as a national tennis tournament on the island, 120 tennis players from all around the country, and 350 plus kids from all over the country playing in the U.S. Kids Tournament. This was the 17th kids tournament like this, U.S. Kids on Jekyll Island, and this one was actually the one that was supposed to have been played last March. So it was rescheduled for the fall, and they will still then come back next year to play next year's tournament in March. So we have a wonderful relationship with them, and it's just a great thing to see those kids out there. And Dr. Evans, I believe you said it was that it was an impressive crowd, you thought.
Absolutely. Not only the kids, but the moms and dads and grandparents all enjoyed golf on Jekyll Island.
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jones. Chairman's comments. Once again, I cannot tell you how proud I am and grateful for this staff, top to bottom. It's just such special people. And in these incredibly trying times, I can never thank them enough. We'll now open the floor for any public comments. Also online, you can do them. Okay, thank you. We will move into the board meeting agenda, and I will now open the September 15, 2020 board meeting of the Jekyll Island Authority. There is still a quorum. And the next item we have is the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 board meeting. Is there a motion to accept the minutes of the August 18, 2020 board meeting as presented? Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the minutes, accepting the minutes of the August 18, 2020 board meeting will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next is the golf course maintenance equipment leases. A vote is required. Board members have received a finance committee recommendation to approve the golf course maintenance equipment leases. Is there any further discussion before a vote? I do not need a second on that. And we've already done a roll call. So any discussion? All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign? Motion carries. Next is the false alarms, 0-2020-3. A vote is required. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to adopt ordinance 2020-3 false alarms as amended. Just want to make sure.
You say that. That's all she wants you to say.
I know. It's okay. Thank you. Trust me, folks, I trust her. And is there any further discussion? Okay, there's no motion or second needed. All those, and we've already had a roll call previously, but all those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. The revision to Jekyll Island Authority Board bylaws and other policies. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to adopt revisions to Jekyll Island Authority Board bylaws and other policies. Is there any further discussion? And we don't need a second. No discussion. And we've had a roll call on that. But we will do a voice vote. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Motion carries. And the master plan amendment, Georgia Power Substation, authorizing notice of proposed amendment to be sent. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to authorize notice of the proposed master plan amendment to be sent to the required state entities. Is there any further discussion? We do not need a motion or a second on that, but we will do a voice vote, having had a roll call. All in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Then we have the engineering and installation design of the new slide complex for Summer Waves Water Park. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to approve funding for the engineering and installation design of the new slide complex for Summer Waves Water Park. Any further discussion before vote? We do not need a motion or second. And all those, we did the roll call, right? So we'll do this by voice vote. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed, like sign? It's been approved. We have the resolution to accept Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT, contract for Jekyll Island Airport R 2020-4. Board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to adopt resolution 2020-4 to accept Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT contract for Jekyll Island Airport. Is there any further discussion? We had a roll call previously. I will do a voice vote. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign? Passes. Then we have the Transportation Alternatives Program application scope change letter. And board members have received a committee of the whole recommendation to approve the Transportation Alternative Program TAP application scope change letter. Any further discussion? We had a roll call. So we will do a voice vote. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, like sign. We will now open the floor for any public comment. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Hallelujah.
All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, like sign. Okay, we are adjourned, and thank you all so much.
Where are you spending most of your time?
That was a